Hey there, K-Korner family. It's your host, Crown, back again with another set of absolutely jaw-dropping true stories that you just won't believe. Today, we've got two incredible tales that will have you on the edge of your seat. In our first story, we're diving into a dramatic supermarket showdown that involves Krav Maga, a drunk mother, and a heroic teenager. Trust me, it's as wild as it sounds. And for our second story, we're switching gears to a tale of betrayal, legal battles, and sweet, sweet justice in a small town. You won't want to miss this, so grab your popcorn, sit back, relax, and let's get into these amazing stories. Before I start, I'll explain a few things. Me, 16-year-old male, not particularly strong, but I do Krav Maga to a decent standard. Krav Maga, a hybrid self-defense style that focuses on ending fights quickly and efficiently. And for reference, there is a nice kid, a drunk mom, sweet cashier, and me, with masters in engineering. So this happened a couple of weeks ago. Basically, my mom hasn't been feeling so great, so I've taken up shopping duties for the time being. I was buying some milk in local supermarket and had just arrived at the tills when I saw a kid on his own in front of me with a pretty big haul of shopping. As it turned out, he was from my Krav Maga class. Because the teacher likes me, I typically help out with training the younger students. And this kid was one to whom I was a close mentor. I said hello and we talked a little. His mom had left him next to the shopping to pick up something she had forgotten. We all know the feeling of approaching the cashier without a parent nearby, which gave us time to chat about training and stuff. Nothing too in-depth. But when we came to the cashier, his mother still hadn't arrived, meaning I had to apologize to the young cashier for the wait. I heard a small commotion behind me and turned around just in time for my face to be directly in front of that of a seemingly half-drunken woman. Short-haired, looked about 100 kilos, and her breast was rancid. Don't tell me that's his mother, I thought. But unfortunately, my suspicions were confirmed when I saw the recognition between the mother and son. I greeted her and told her about my mentoring of her son, but she didn't listen. Instead, she made a noise and turned to the cashier, before producing a wad of coupons and pushing them towards the poor lady at the tills. With a sigh, she rifled through them, looked up at the half-drunk beast in front of her, and sweetly told her that they were invalid. I don't remember the exact confrontation, but the words were something to this effect. "Piss off! Check again!" The cashier, rifling through them again. "Sorry, they are all expired or for a different store." "No, look, this one. This one says expires on the 20th of December. Being a bit of a nosy person, I listened in. It was starting to click with me that this woman, between her previous demeanor and her slightly slurred speech, must have been at least half drunk. "I'm sorry, madam, but that's the 20th December last year." The entitled mother, muttering, "Last year, my arse." The entitled mother then proceeds to reach into her purse and retrieved a small number of credit cards, trying them one by one. They failed again and I couldn't help but feel sorry for her, considering her seemingly bad financial position, until I noticed a sudden change in tone. She said loudly, "The hell do you mean? None of them work. I used them yesterday, and they work just fine." "I guess you ran out of credit or something. Do you have any other means of pay?" "Just give them to me. I'll take them as compensation for your poor customer service." The cashier awkwardly says, "I'm afraid I can't do that, madam. You'll have to pay or I can get someone to help you take these items back." There was a moment of silence before the entitled mother began clumsily rooting around in her handbag. The nice kid seemed worried, which probably should have foreshadowed the upcoming scenario. The poor cashier's eyes widened as the entitled mother finally dragged her hand out of the bag to reveal a knife. Now, before we go any further, you should understand something about the UK knife laws. Whilst it's legal to carry most knives on your person as long as the blade is under 3 inches, there are a few types that you cannot carry regardless of length. A good guide to this can be found here, but the knife used by the entitled mother was a switchblade. For those of you who don't know, this is essentially a knife that has a button in the hilt that causes the blade to extend from it. Illegal to carry in the UK, but I guess the entitled mother didn't really care. On with the story. The entitled mother flicked the knife out and pointed it in the general direction of the store cashier. She muttered something about disrespect as she moved closer and grabbed a bottle of wine from the till. I will admit I was crapping myself here, but I knew that I should have done something. So I stupidly put a hand on the entitled mother's shoulder to try and stop her. This earned me a small nick on my cheek, and it became clear to me that the entitled mother didn't really know what she was doing. She swung again, and I caught her arm and removed the knife from her hand, kicking it away. Surprisingly, she didn't try to reach the knife, so we stared at each other for a while, in a sort of awkward tango position until we heard the police arrive. Fortunately, they handled the situation and arrested the entitled mother. Taking some statements from the store cashier, the nice kid and me before they left, with the entitled mother and nice kid in tow. I don't really know what she got charged with, but the nice kid is living with his aunt now, so she must have lost custody. I haven't seen the cashier in a local supermarket recently, so I assume she got some time off to recover. I am personally glad that no one got properly injured, and I guess it makes a good story for me to tell. During last week's Krav Maga training, I got to talk to the nice kid. Turns out his parents have been going through a messy divorce for a few months now. No one could agree on anything and it dragged out, causing the entitled mother to turn to alcohol. I am super glad the nice kid got out of that situation, and he seems much happier now that he's living with his aunt. Hey folks, Crown here with a quick reminder. If you're loving these stories, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to K-Korner for more crazy true stories, and hit that bell icon so you never miss out. And I want to hear from you too. Drop a comment down below and share your thoughts on today's stories. Now let's jump back into the action. I worked for a company, though it was really just a guy who owned a few businesses, and he was the richest person in a very small town. It's important to explain how I ended up in this situation, and I'll try to make it quick to get to the meat and potatoes of the story. I joined the military before completing high school due to late birthdays and all that. I chose a military career path that I thought I would enjoy, and since I loved working on things, I became a mechanic. The role offered a great sign-on bonus, which was an added perk. I went through basic training, only ever spending money on necessities, so I saved up quite a lot. I saved even more through advanced training for my MOS, military job. By the time I was done with both, I had half of my sign-on bonus and just short of an entire year's pay in my bank account. While most of my age would have splurged, I invested in the stock markets and Bitcoin and paid off my parents' house. A couple of deployments and the other half of my bonus later, the only thing I really ever spent money on outside of necessities was my hot rod. Needless to say, I had some money saved up and invested it in as well. Long story short, when I was discharged, I was quite comfortable financially even after a nasty divorce. Don't get me wrong, I don't have an outrageous amount of money, but due to the divorce, a lot of stocks were cashed out and split. And if anyone has followed Bitcoin over the past 2 decades, you know how that's gone. After my divorce, I worked to recover what I had lost and then just to keep busy. As I've said, I love working as a mechanic. I would bounce around wherever I felt like, since a good mechanic can make money anywhere. After a decade of this, I decided to set roots in a small town for a quieter life. By this point, I was tired of always working on other people's cars and wanted to devote time to working on my own car. I bought a small house and saw a help wanted sign at the local lube shop. I figured it would be a simple work for me and would cover my few expenses. I grabbed an application from the office, receiving all kinds of looks from the townies. By the way, I'm 6'3", and since being discharged from the military, I had stopped cutting my hair and shaving, and I had a full sleeve tattoo. Needless to say, most people would cross the street instead of walking past me. When I went to turn in my application, the bookkeeper, let's call her Sue, asked me a couple of questions. Noticed I was a veteran and marked a Y on my application. Later that day, Sue called me and asked if I would come back in to meet the owner, whom we will call Peter. I agreed and Sue said Peter would be there in an hour, so if I came in then, we could talk about the position. I showed up and Peter's eyes bulged at first sight, but we got to chatting and my southern charm won him over. He tossed me a calendar that he made of his car collection and asked me to name the ones I recognized. There were a couple of Mustangs, a Ford GT, a Bricklin SV1, a Judge, a Demon, a Pantera, and a MXT. He was impressed that I knew what the SV1 was, and we chatted about cars for a bit. He offered me the position and explained that I would be paid $100 a day, working Monday to Saturday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with no overtime. However, I would get a full day's pay even if we close the shop early for some reason. I would be off every Sunday and one extra day during the week. The job started great and I worked maybe a year with no issues. Peter then asked if I could help him out by being a relief worker for his other loop shops in neighboring towns. He said he would give me an additional $20 every day for travel, and basically I will be covering so that guys could take days off at the other stores. I agreed and did this for about a year, then disaster struck. Peter met Karen and fell madly in love. And within a month, they were married and he started supporting her and her gambling problem. This is when all problems started. One week I noticed my paycheck was only $250 and asked about it. Sue told me there had been some changes and that I should really speak to Peter about it. Sure, no problem. I called Peter and asked if we could talk about some things. And he showed up with Karen in tow, and when I asked why my pay was short, he told me it was because of the bad weather and us closing early, which affected the business. I would have let it go at that because Peter was a nice guy, but Karen decided to speak up. It isn't very fair to us to have to pay you for a full day if you don't work the full 10 hours, she said that. I pointed out that I was on a negotiated day rate, and if I get paid for each day I work, not hourly, that's why I don't get paid for 19 hours of overtime each week. She claimed that's not how it works anymore, and that from now on, I will be paid only for the hours I worked and nothing else. Okay, whatever you say, Karen. Fast forward to the next week, we had a week's worth of very busy days where we were open a couple of hours later than normal to finish up with waiting customers. I gave up one of my days off to cover for a sick co-worker. So when what should have easily been an over $800 paycheck was only $600, I had some questions. I called Peter and asked him what was going on and why I only got paid $600. He said, well, that's what we agreed on, $100 a day. I looked at him blankly and asked if he forgot about last week, and he just said, it is what it is. At this point, I was aggravated, and that's when Karen walked in and asked, so what's he complaining about now? I looked at her coldly and said, well, I worked 80 hours last week, and y'all only paid me $600. She looked at me and said, you're contracted labor, and you agreed to $100 per day, so why would we pay you more than that? I looked at Peter and asked if that's how it was, and he just said, you heard the lady. I went home and convinced myself that I was only working to cover my few living expenses anyway. The job wasn't that hard, and the only other jobs in this small town would have been assembling sheds or working at a chicken plant. The next week, one of the guys I worked with was getting yelled at in front of customers by Karen over what she claimed was an OSHA violation. She said that as part owner of the company, it was her responsibility to ensure that all OSHA regulations were met, and his apparent violation was him wearing tinted safety glasses. Now, this is nonsense because the bays faced east-west, it was how the cars pulled in, top workers got the sun during the day, and the pit worker got it in the evening. I shook my head as I was walking in, and like a T-Rex in a dinosaur movie, it attracted Karen's attention, and she decided to shout at me. You got something to say, you big witch? And I just kept walking. I told Sue she needed to have a long talk with Peter before Karen's mouse wrote checks he would have to cash, and she said, I just keep the books, don't involve me. So this behavior went on for another year, and finally, I reached my limit. On the day I started my malicious compliance, I was in a very bad mood. I had woken up to the news that a good friend of mine, responsible for my survival after being blown up in Iraq, was killed by a drunk driver. Not wanting to deal with anyone, I told the shop I would be working in the pit all day and to just let me be. These guys had been working with me for a few years now and knew something was up. I never once thought that this would be a day that I would need to deal with Karen, since I was working at the furthest shop from the main shop, and it was in the opposite direction of the casinos. But I wasn't so lucky, or maybe I was. Peter and Karen showed up and she stormed into the pit screaming for Peter to come look at this mess. I had no idea what she was talking about because I always kept the pit spotless and would clean as I worked, whereas a lot of others would clean at the end of the day. Her complaint was about 50 of the most common oil filters we would use in a day being stacked on my waste drums for easy access, so I wouldn't have to wait for the top guys to hand me filters. I did this all the time, and Peter knew about it and never cared before. He comes down, looks around, and tells me, like he's talking to a teenager, "Clean up this pigsty." I shake my head and say, "Today is not the day, Peter. Move on, and take her with you." This incident seemed to infuriate Karen, who took it as a great disrespect to both her and Peter. He told me that if I didn't like the situation, I was free to leave. So I did. But don't worry, this story is far from over. It's merely the first event in a series that led to a major upheaval. The following day, Peter asked me to stop by the main store on my way home. I thought he might apologize for the previous day's incident, possibly informed by one of my colleagues about why I had been upset, but that wasn't the case. Instead, Peter informed me that I would be placed on a probation period for the next 6 months due to my actions. During this period, I will be paid only $50 a day, without the usual $20 for travel to other shops. When I questioned him about the seriousness of his decision, Peter showed his true colors. He told me that I was lucky not to be fired for my constant disrespect towards him and Karen, the co-owner. He insinuated that if he hadn't pitted me for being a struggling disabled veteran based on my appearance, since I had never discussed my financial situation with them, he would have fired me long ago. I couldn't help but laugh, standing up to him, suggesting he reconsider his life choices and business partners. In response, Peter taunted me about suing him, doubting my financial ability to do so. That wasn't my plan, but his attitude prompted me to act. I retained a labor lawyer for $3,000 and filed a lawsuit for an unsafe work environment, unpaid overtime, and minimum wage violations, all while continuing to work there. The lawyer, a former Marine, took about 6 months to prepare the case, deliberately slow-rolling the process at my request. Once everything was ready, my lawyer served the papers to Peter and Karen at the main store. The reaction was explosive and abusive, resulting in my immediate firing, which was recorded by the process server and added to the lawsuit as unlawful termination. I then opened my own automotive service and car wash, offering my former co-workers better pay plus commission. Many joined the lawsuit, and 2 years later, despite an initial low settlement offer from Peter and Karen, we declined and pressed on. Evidence surfaced that they had been exploiting tax credits for employing a veteran, me, under false pretenses across multiple businesses. At the next mediation, faced with the evidence, they settled for $400,000 in unpaid overtime, all legal fees, and a personal settlement for unlawful termination, with the condition of a gag order. After the settlement, their tax issues caught up with them, resulting in an IRS audit and an investigation for tax fraud. I sold the business to my co-workers, moved away, and later learned of the aftermath. Peter filed for bankruptcy, Karen left, and the fraudulent tax paperwork was possibly discovered and reported by someone handling their claims. The full extent of the fallout, including the fate of Peter's car collection, remains unknown to me. Of course, we signed and we took our paychecks, but somehow their tax paperwork made its way to just the right person at the IRS, and they decided to audit Peter and Karen. An investigation was opened on them for tax fraud. I sold a shop I opened to the guys that came over and jumped in on a lawsuit. They each paid me $8,000 and I washed my hands of it. I put my house up for sale and moved away. I did go back about 8 months later because a guy who was supposed to take care of the lawn had apparently been arrested, and the yard went a few months without being caught before the city informed me that they were going to fine me $100 a day until it was brought to code, so I went down to mow it myself. While there, I decided to check in with my realtor to see if there was anything we could do about my yard maintenance, and who do I see but little old Sue sitting pretty at the front desk. Sue couldn't speak fast enough to tell me what all had happened, and it was perfect. What I thought was an Apache turned out to be an atom bomb. Peter filed bankruptcy to try and not go broke after making a plea deal for probation for tax fraud and paying a ton in unpaid taxes. Karen took off with some dude she met at a casino. I asked Sue 2 questions. If she knew who reported the fraudulent tax paperwork to the IRS and what happened with Peter's car collection. She told me I have no idea and to check the parking behind the realtor's office before leaving. On my way out, I took a peek behind the realtor's office to see a safety green SV1 sitting there. Apparently, Peter started selling off his cars early and cheap, hoping he would be able to buy them back after filing bankruptcy. To this day, I have no idea who, if anyone, actually turned in the paperwork to the IRS. My personal theory is whoever was tasked with compiling it all with their claims noticed something strange and reported it. However it happened, it couldn't have happened to anyone more deserving. Wow, what a roller coaster of emotions in today's stories, right? From the intensity of a supermarket confrontation to the twist-filled tale of workplace drama, these stories really had it all. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. Remember, life is full of unexpected moments, and here at K-Korner we bring those moments right to you. Make sure to join our K-Korner family by subscribing and stay tuned for more unbelievable true stories. Until next time, keep it carefree and easygoing, and I'll see you in the next video.